Good morning, I'm Ahmed Elnaggar and this is Monday Legal. And as you know, we agreed with Clotilde to be our special guest who appears at least once a month to speak to us about important legal topics. Thank you very much for coming again.
Thank you so much, Ahmed, for having me today and in the past few months. How was your summer, Ahmed?
It was fantastic. My summer was really good, great. I spent so much quality time with my family, mom and dad, and my son, my daughter. No, it was great. I'm happy to be back. Happy to continue the episodes, and we always would like to speak about important legal topics, especially with the family law, and that's why we have the expert with us.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here today because actually we're going to speak about your country, Egypt. So your President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi, so hopefully I pronounced that correctly.
Very good.
On May 20 of 2024, issued the Unified Insurance Law number 155 of 2024. Now, this is a general insurance law that introduced different type of amendments to Egyptian insurance law. Of course, we don't have the time or the interest in these specific circumstances to review the whole law, which is quite extensive. But there was one part of the law that caught my attention, and actually thank you because you flagged it to me. Which is something peculiar that we've not seen before and in any other countries as far as I'm aware, and is the obligation for, is introducing the obligation for people that intend to get married in Egypt to enter or to apply for an insurance coverage that would cover some expenses that are connected with a possible or potential divorce. The laws provide for some minimum fee payment, which I think from my understanding is affordable by majority probably of Egyptians that would be in age of getting married.
Yes.
Because the Egyptian pounds.
It's like 50,
it's about
50 pounds.
It's 50 Egyptian pounds at the time of the marriage contract fee, and then there is another small fee to be paid in case of divorce, which is 25 Egyptian pounds. So what is that in US dollars, Ahmed?
Well, 50 pounds is a little more than $1.
Okay.
So
very important. Yeah.
As a contribution, I think it's a nominal contribution. However, I find it quite unique. I haven't seen any insurance policy against divorce before. I don't know, maybe celebrities in Hollywood would have something like that. I haven't seen it also.
Maybe I was thinking that perhaps maybe some life insurance might be able to cover divorce as like an unexpected event that can affect your financial condition. I'm not sure if you can really, if there are honestly other countries where you can insure against divorce, because at the end of the day, divorce is something that you choose. And so how is the really insurance companies going to foresee or to avoid to think that that's been done on purpose, for instance, by insured to claim the insured amount for it, I guess, right?
That's quite a good risk that you're talking about, that the insurance regulator have to come up with some internal regulations to make sure that really it is a genuine case, is not just a fabricated one. And I don't know, maybe the contribution to the insurance will define what is the amount that will be paid in the end. I just find it very significant that maybe it's steered by the amount of cases where the women are left out after divorce with not enough financial support, so that they came up with such policy to maybe help and make it obligation for the husband to contribute to this
or maybe
kind of
for
policy.
Perhaps the government with this money will be able to create a fund.
Of course.
And maybe it's a government fund that will be funded with this sort of, so they call it insurance, but perhaps it's more like a tax
Yeah.
So that fixed tax that is going to go or towards potentially funding an eventual divorce. So the peculiarity of the law is that, of course, in Egypt, for the woman to claim the premium from the insurance, to claim the insured amount from the insurance, she would have to be, the divorce must have been irrevocable. And as I was reading a little bit about it, because of course it is a bit different from what we're used to in the UAE, and so the divorce will have to be, so you have to help me with this concept. So I understand that the divorced woman will have been divorced by her husband at least 3 times.
Yeah.
Or they would have to have divorced three
times to be considered an irrevocable divorce, like a final one.
Yes, a final one. And so I was wondering, I was researching how that happens in practice, and my understanding is that every time the husband divorces the woman, then there has to be at least 1 menstrual cycle before he can divorce the woman another time. Or,
yes, I mean the 3 months is the 3 cycles basically are the period where the woman is not able to marry again, or to get into another marriage after the divorce. And during this cycle, this 3 cycles are the couple has the right, or the husband who made the divorce has the right to revoke it.
To revoke it.
Yes.
And it can revoke it up until the very last.
Up until the very last day of the 3rd cycle.
All right, but if it is, if he, let's say he has divorced, the husband has divorced the wife twice, then he changes his mind and recall the wife, then they would have to enter into a new marriage contract.
Actually, every time the 3 cycles lapse without a revoking of the divorce, there must be a new contract.
There must be a new contract.
For every time. However, after the 3rd divorce and the lapse of the 3 cycles, the divorce considered final, and there is no way for this couple to be reunited again unless the woman got into a new marriage and got a newer divorce with another man. Actual marriage, not a fake one.
Yes.
Actual marriage and the divorce and the lapse of also the 3 cycles, then they might be reunited again. But that's, I guess, a very rare cases that wouldn't happen.
Very rare.
Yes.
Have you ever heard of somebody going through all of this and then returning together?
It's funny. We've seen a lot of movies about this. Especially comedy movies about this. It
must be
scenario.
A little bit funny that somebody would go through all this pain and then going back together.
It was portrayed many times that this is a procedure that the couple who are like very energetic and very irrational who go into the 3 divorces, and then afterwards they really want to come back together, and for this they get into al-muhallal. There's someone who will create this occasion for them to be able to remarry again, and of course all the comedian scenarios.
I'm trying to understand where all the drama in relationship in the Mediterranean area of the world.
I think it's the sea breeze of the Mediterranean that creates this kind of drama, but it's fun at some time.
I thought it was really funny because the difference, for instance, in how but this is just to have a little bit of anecdotal example, how Anglo-Saxon perceive relationship and pursuing somebody, and how that works at least in the Mediterranean. And when I speak about Mediterranean, it's because I'm from Apulia, which is on the Ionian Sea, but the Greeks have very similar kind of type of courtship code, because of course it's not a written code, right? But you know that the woman has to be, the first 5-6 times somebody asks you out, the answer is going to be no.
Yes.
And they will never call you, and they will never tell you that they like you. So there are like unwritten rules that you know that would apply, right? But this reminds me a little bit of this. I mean, I think sometimes what we have then codified now in the law is also because of it's important to address the uses and customs of a certain specific way of reasoning or things happening.
Right. Divorce in general, I think it's a very sensitive topic and a very sensitive matter, and that's why I believe in the Sharia regulations it was put to be too regulated, and there's a lot of timelines in it and a lot of restrictions for it, especially this 2 or 3 times, and the third time after divorce you cannot remarry unless there is this situation and so on. I think it is quite logical, because marriage is not a fun topic. It is an important topic, and it's a serious matter. If it was left to be an easy
of course, it should be a last resort.
Absolutely.
Yes, absolutely, I agree. Question is for you. I have a question for you, since you're from Egypt. So the law only provides this insurance for men to pay, and to pay then the claim, the insured amount, which is at the end, I mean, the minimum is 25,000 Egyptian pounds is paid to the woman. But there is no provision, for instance, that the other way around could happen. Like, is it very unlikely or uncommon in Egypt that perhaps the woman would be earning more money and the husband would be a house husband?
That's actually a very interesting question. I would say that when they draft the law, they consider the majority and the very common situation, that what happened in society. No, you wouldn't see a house-kept husband. Maybe you would
house husband. I wouldn't call him a house kept husband. He's not captive.
I would say that yes, you wouldn't see that occasion happening a lot, and even if you see it, you find it socially and culturally something that is not very commonly agreed upon or acceptable. So you wouldn't find the regulator confirming or considering a very odd occasion, you know, for something that is not very commonly happening. And when they draft the law, they feel like, okay, what is the most...
women are still the weakest link in the relationship.
Absolutely. Even with how modern Egypt is becoming the last 20, 30 years, and the changes and how many women are earning,
working,
much more than they are earning, but still they look at the conflicts and the number of conflicts, and they find that women are much more likely to be suffering financially, and
especially probably in the lower economic section of the population. I mean,
could be, yes, absolutely, yes, it could be. I mean, when we talk about lower social standards, there would be everybody working, and I might say the women at the less privileged social standards would be working much more than the women in the higher society. And where the higher society, probably, I would say that they are much more prone to such risks. However, the regulator would like to see, I think they will be considering the amount of cases and amount of conflicts in front of the court where you see the women less privileged. In that case, they put something like that.
The protection is for the weaker, for the party in the marriage that is usually considered as the weakest party in the marriage.
The big question mark would be the amount.
No, in most cases, right? In most countries, I think maybe there is maybe countries in the northern part of Europe are the few countries where maybe equality on that point of view is has reached a level that it's perhaps more on a balance between men and women, but otherwise I think everywhere is the same. The woman is still the weakest party in a case of a divorce from a financial standpoint, because generally women make less money, so that's
most possible. I was just commenting on the amount. I think the regulator have put a minimum for it. I'll be very much interested into looking at how much would be the actual practice, how much people were going to be contributing, because if they contribute more, I guess the insurance policy pay in the end will be much better.
Yeah, because £25,000 are around $530. Yeah. Which doesn't sound much, especially in Dubai money.
Yes.
It's not something that would solve anyone's issue, probably a couple of days, maybe 3.
So that brings me to the next question. Do you think we should apply this here?
Have an insurance here. I think it would be great, especially because, as you know, the main issue here is when divorce happens is that because most families, again, we speak about majority of cases, and not everyone is the same, but the majority of cases you have a husband that has been moved here by the multinational corporation he works for, and the wife leaves their job, the wives leave their jobs in their country of origin, and then they're here and they might find another job, or they might not be able to find a job, or they might decide to focus on the children because the husband is focusing on their career. So in order to support the husband in his career, they would just not work for a few years, and then the husband or the wife, the marriage is not working, and the husband, so the wife needs to divorce the husband. And one of the main issue that we find affects affects women and children is there an inability for a certain period of time to have access to funds, especially if the divorce has not been amicable. And very often men use economic pressure in order to try to get the best out of the situation, or force their decisions and their wishes into this very initial phase, which sometimes, I mean, in Abu Dhabi, it's a very short period of time. It's about 3-4 months. It can also be shorter, but in Dubai it can extend to 6 months and more.
Yeah.
If it is very litigious, and if there are lots of discoveries to be made during the petitions for alimony, and so that's something that is troubling for many women. So I would think that a solution of this type, if provided by the government, would be an amazing tool to protect women. It would also probably assist the government into providing assistance to or funding, any place like refuge for women that are in abusive relationship and whose husband have left with no money, with no access to groceries, and perhaps with children. So if there was something like that, I think we would solve a lot of these very extreme cases. So we're not speaking about the majority of cases, but there are cases like that.
Right.
And I'm often called by women telling me, my friend has been left by her husband. He left the country, he left her in an apartment with no electricity, no groceries, and she has 2 children to feed. And now her visa will expire and she doesn't know what to do. And it's heartbreaking, and I can't, of course, you can't help every single one. And there is a Women Foundation who's doing a lot to support these women. but it's only one foundation.
Yeah.
So I think it would be an amazing tool. Maybe, I don't know if they can do it in the form of an insurance. As I was saying, maybe they can do it the same thing they've done for, you know, an insurance for if you lose your job. So you have a number of salaries that you can claim.
Yeah.
So they could, at the moment of somebody moving here, agree that they have to pay, especially if they come with a husband and children, that they would have to pay to a fund a certain amount per month or per year to ensure that if something like this happen, like, you know, before, I don't know if they do it still, but, you know, you'd have to pay, like, to, when you do a visa, you'll have to pay an amount to cover the ticket, to return, to return. Maybe they could do something like that. So if you bring your wife and children and your wife is not working, then you can ask that specific employee to be, in order, you know, if something happened or if you decide to divorce, here is a fund, you have to pay mandatorily, I don't know, 2% of your salary per year in order to cover the possibility that you might leave your husband and children in the country without any support.
Yeah.
And that would be amazing, I think, because...
So
what do you think?
I think it's a brilliant idea. I think it's as Dubai always show us, as the UAE, United Arab Emirates always show that they take brilliant ideas like this and they do it better than anyone.
Yeah.
I can imagine that if an insurance policy and the regulator would choose to introduce a mandatory insurance policy for the married
that is affordable.
couple,
So this is why I was thinking at a percentage of the salary, right?
Yes.
Then, you know, each one can contribute more.
Yes.
But it could be a solution.
It will work, I think, amazing for the welfare of the society, and everybody will be happy about it. So I give my message to the regulator here and the insurance regulator in the UAE and the UAE government, if there is any way to consider a new regulation to make it mandatory to protect the interests of families and interests of children and women who are here in the UAE, to introduce an insurance policy that can be mandatory for married couple to protect the family from the devastating consequences of divorce, that would be very highly regarded and seen by the community.
Yes, and we would be very happy to speak about it in our next podcast, hopefully. Yeah,
of course.
Yeah.
One more question, because I want to shake a little bit the conversation.
Let's shake it.
We always speak how the women are most affected and maybe the weaker part, but I've seen through my experience, and I'm not a family law expert, but I get involved in mediation and sometimes in conflicts. We have seen the other way around a few times, where it is unreasonable requests by the divorced wife, for example, towards the husband, and sometimes life consequences, like life conditions change. So a husband who gets paid 50,000 dirham a month suddenly loses his job, and he has a contract with an obligation to pay a big amount of money for his ex-wife and children, and then life change.
Yeah.
And it's very common to happen, especially here when we are all expats and so on. What do you see happening at court, really? Because I've seen the other side as well, men complaining of, we cannot afford it anymore, and we have.
I've seen the men as well. We have also made clients between our clients. That, of course, I have to say that clients male clients that come to us are very reasonable, and they want to ensure that they give what it's due, but they don't want to also become extremely litigious. And so I guess this is why they come to a law firm like ours, because they understand that we don't seek litigation at all costs.
Yeah.
We only really do it as an extrema ratio, like something that you do because you can't find other solution. I've heard of cases like this. In my experience and what we've seen in the non-Muslim courts so far, the judges' decisions are very reasonable compared to the salaries earned by the fathers.
Okay.
Very reasonable. So I'm not sure if things like this that you're describing, where the father is struggling, maybe happened before.
Yes, they're not recent verdicts. They are the day before, and mainly when
because now
there is a contract.
The law has incorporated in it to say that the judge has discretion in determining what the father must pay, and it is only discretional again that the father might, for instance, let's split Dubai and Abu Dhabi.
Yes.
So with regards to Dubai, so regulation number 122 of 2023 expressly says that even the woman has the right to have accommodation paid by the father at the discretion of the judge. So the judge has very wide discretionary power to decide if in the circumstances the woman has a right to receive the payment for accommodation. And of course there are cases where women are working and perhaps making more money than the husband.
Yes.
And in those cases I tend to suggest to my clients that in those cases the judge might not provide, might decide that it's not the case for the father to pay for accommodation, because if you have a very good job and you're earning good money and you're able to pay for your own accommodation, I don't see why the judge will consider it necessary. Now for spouses, exactly, where the circumstances have changed, decisions taken in regards to divorce, they are always issued as a decree, so they're not judgment. They're never final, because life is not final. Things can change, so you can always make a petition to the court, and the court can make changes to the original issued decree if certain circumstances have changed. Now, in Dubai, the law does not provide for a minimum number of years that have to be passed for you to be able to reassess or reevaluate your contract or the economic condition that have been prescribed by the judge in case of an alimony petition being made and decided. But in Abu Dhabi, the judge would tend not to consider any amendments before 2 years. But also on the other hand, these decisions only have a validity of 2 years. So after 2 years, if things are really tough, you can go back and say, look, things have really changed and I cannot longer afford it, or my wife in the meantime left the country and left me with the children, so I don't want to pay anymore any alimony because she's not taking care of the children anymore, and she's left and she's living in another country. These things happen. Yeah. And so of course we would have to keep these into consideration, and the law does provide for the possibility of requiring an amendment of the decree in case of change in circumstances of each of the parties. The same thing can happen in the other way around. Like, for instance, you can have a case where the husband at the time of the divorce was making a salary which was a lot lower, and then suddenly gets like a super increase in salary, and then the wife could request for the children to have better education or better lifestyle conditions. It is of course difficult for an ex-wife to prove, because all goes back into your ability to provide evidence of the facts that your ex is actually earning a lot more than what was, what his salary was at the time when they were indeed married. The law doesn't specify really if the changes can only happen going down, or if they can also happen, be made upwards. So I'm assuming that you can make the request even for a change to go upwards. Another case where, you know, changes can be required is due to inflation.
Yeah.
So as you know, in Dubai, in the UAE in general, for instance, the prices and cost of accommodation
went up so high
that sometimes what you could afford, or you could afford to live with a certain amount of money, now is completely insufficient to provide even you know, as an accommodation that is sufficiently close to the schools for the children where the child is attending. So in those circumstances, obviously, the women will have the right to also require a change in the conditions of divorce and alimony provision. Of course, again, we have to be able to prove. So we need to provide the court, for instance, with previous tenancy contracts, new tenancy contract, why were they, for instance, evicted, and how much. But you know, this is part of the game, and part of our job as lawyers to make sure that we have sufficient evidence to support the petition for a change. One way or the other. So if it is a change in circumstances and the father is actually no longer making the same amount of money and therefore is no longer able to afford to pay that much money, or the circumstances of the father can also change because he's remarried, so might have had another child from the second marriage, and therefore in that case the resources of the father will have to be shared equally between the children, all of the children of the father. So a reassessment of the economic condition of the father can be requested to the judge through a specific petition.
Is there a protocol or let's say an industry approved percentage compared to what the father earns and what the alimony, or how much money he can dedicate out to the kids and to the ex-wife?
So there are certain...
I heard everything, again, honestly.
Everything under the sun, but there are, again, it's very short time that we are seeing this new law being practiced, right? So we have to, again, make a distinction between Dubai and Abu Dhabi.
Yes.
Abu Dhabi regulation number 8 is very specific to some part of the alimony that needs to be paid to the wife. And then it leaves another type of alimony at the discretion of the judge. Dubai leaves the entirely in the hands of the judge. However, the judge will have to consider a number of aspects that are listed by the law. And those aspects are the economic conditions of the father, the duration of the marriage, whose fault it is that the marriage has ended. So despite the fact that this is called a no-fault divorce, and so you can apply and you don't have to have a reason why the divorce is being applied for. However, specific circumstances to the reasons why the divorce has happened can be used during the petition for alimony to determine the amount of money that the woman or the husband, that the woman will be entitled to as alimony for herself, not for the children.
Not for the children, okay.
Then what is the father obliged to pay? The father must pay education, clothing, anything,
medical, housing
that is related to the children is the father's responsibility.
Yes.
As to the payment of the rental of the place where the children live, because of the fact that, you know, here in the UAE we have to make a distinction between custody and guardianship.
Yes.
The custody is split 50-50 between the father and the mother, but very often the children leave, or the judge will decide that the children leave mostly with the mother. Why? Because the father are working full time. It's not fair for children to be brought up by a nanny. And because the wife is usually a stay-at-home mom, so a homemaker, the wife is the one that keeps usually the children during the week and then the children go with the father during the weekend. We find that in Dubai, unlike in Abu Dhabi, the law does not say that if any of the parents remarry, then that parent loses the ability to guardianship of the child. So the parents may remarry, and that does not necessarily imply or affect custody. However, in practice, we have seen in the few cases that we've handled that the judges will tend to, when somebody has remarried, will tend to agree with the mother that it is better. So if the father, for instance, is remarried, the judge will limit the time that the minor will have to stay in the father's place, or vice versa, of the spouse that remarried. Especially if the remarriage or the marriage has happened very quickly after the divorce. Because unlike in the case, for instance, of a divorce due to Sharia law, so where you have to wait 3 months before you can remarry, according to non-Muslim or foreigners, Federal Law 41 of 2021, there's no such a thing. There is no waiting time. So you have to wait the 30 days for the divorce decree to be published, and that's it. So it is, it's harder. It's harder to convince the judge that the situation is fine and that they can live with the father or with the mother that remarried so quickly after a divorce. So I would say for anybody that perhaps is thinking of divorcing and immediately remarried, to think about the children, because it is traumatic for a child to see, to go through a divorce and then immediately having to accept someone else in the family, and then having to go and live in someone else's house with somebody that they've not known for much time. So it's a little bit tough on that in that regards. So these are the situation where we find that. And then, of course, because of that, it affects the alimony. Who has the children the most affects alimony. So father tend to want to question the ability of the mother of keeping the children and try to get more time with the children because they hope to spend less money. But the courts so far have been shown to be very smart in understanding, in really speaking with the children, especially Dubai, where you have social services is quite developed in terms of their ability of really getting into the nitty-gritty of the situation, being able to speak to the children, to the parents. Abu Dhabi is also quite, again, conservative on that point, tend to protect women's right to rear their own children rather than giving them to a father that works 8 to 12 hours a day and has no support or no nanny or no maid, and so not every case, of course, is like those that I'm describing. We are speaking about very majority situation where with the majority of cases that arrive to a litigation, you have situation, of course, of conflict, because otherwise divorce is hard by itself. People try to find amicable solution before getting to a point where they have to fight in these circumstances. So going back to the economic rights and Dubai, so lots of discretion from the judge, and so even the payment of the housing of the place where the children live, that usually is with the mother, is at the discretion of the judge if the father will also pay for accommodation. In Abu Dhabi, no, it's a mandatory. So the father is responsible to pay for accommodation or where the children are living, even if they're living majority of the time with the mother. They have to also provide education, medical insurance, or support many medical expenses. as well as food and anything really that the children need. The mother instead, and going back to you asking for a percentage, so in Abu Dhabi is very specific. So there are two types of alimony. One alimony is what the wife is expected to receive as part of her parting gift, we could call it. Like, okay, we've been together for so many years, you've contributed by working, I've contributed by taking care of the children of the house and everything else. So the judge will liquidate something that is 25% of the monthly salary of the husband for the number of years that they've been married.
Yeah.
On top of this alimony, then the judge will also compensate the woman with a percentage of the assets that the couple has acquired during the time they've been married.
Yeah.
So that percentage is at the discretion of the judge to decide how much it is. In our experience, a marriage of 10 years, that percentage will be around 20-25%. Mm-hmm. So as the years of marriage become more and more, I would expect that somebody that has been married 26 to 30 years, which is also like it's a half of your lifetime as an adult,
should get
would
like
probably about 50%. This is what we've seen in practice. So usually Abu Dhabi, I think 100% of the cases custody is shared 50-50, but guardianship can be also 50-50. Some cases though it's not possible because of the fact the father works a lot, and so they have to have, instead of that, visitation rights. Sometimes the father don't want to have guardianship of the children because they know they can't really do it, especially without help. So sometimes it's difficult because the mother would like more involvement of the other parent in the life of the children, but it depends, every couple is really different, so you'll have to see the circumstances by circumstances.
Case by case basis.
Another thing that can happen, and some parents do that, especially Western couples, in the best interest of the children, they can decide to apply what is called nest. So the children stay in the nest, so they stay in the family home, or what was the family home while they were married, and the parents are the ones switching. So they do maybe 1 week or 2 weeks each with the children in the marital home, and then the other one goes and stay at a separate apartment for the other 2 weeks. I think this is for the children is the best solution, because then the children are not the one going to go back and forward with a suitcase at a very early stage of their life, when they're still difficult for them to understand what is going on. It can be unsettling for some children. For instance, children don't really work well with change. So for some children works, and if the parents really have the best interest of the children at heart, that's something that they would tend to do. Of course, you have to be able to work with your partner to get to that type of arrangement. But even in cases where there has been a highly conflictual divorce on the economic conditions, some parents have been able to maintain the nest as at least as a minimum of condition for the children to feel that they could still work well together in parenting the children together.
Very interesting discussion. Let's go for a break, have a coffee, and come back to this very interesting topic.
Amazing. See you in a bit.